micrometeorites, and of course the total lack of atmospheric pressure and oxygen in space. They've come to be amazingly complex examples of modern engineering, as well as symbols of humanity's future. Symbols of humanity's future. Symbols of humanity's future. Symbols of humanity's future.
So if the Earth is flat, fixed and unmoving, and covered by the firmament, then there's no such thing as outer space. And if there's no such thing as outer space, then it does seem increasingly plausible that what we're presented our entire lives as outer space is actually some kind of materialistic depiction of the spiritual realms, the spiritual planes. And if that is indeed the case, then it seems to follow that when we look at things like rocket ships, spacecraft, and space suits, that these things too actually would seem to have an esoteric meaning as well. And I touched upon this in my previous video, but I just wanted to try and stop and explore this a little further. Now, I do realize that this might sound a little weird, even to people who believe in the flat Earth. So, what do I mean here? I mean, obviously I'm not saying that there's no such thing as a spacesuit, quote unquote. They are real. But the question of real spacesuits actually ties into this quite a bit. Recently, Bob and Jeranism and the Morgul just had a really excellent conversation talking about spacesuits and why this is just a fantastic proof as to why there's so much, NASA and space travel is so fake. Just going into a lot of detail about a vacuum versus the 15 pounds per square inch of pressure that we experience in our atmosphere, and what that would really mean to have a pressurized spacesuit in the vacuum of space. And this kind of thing is a really good thing I think to show to people who are skeptical but maybe do have more of an engineering kind of mindset or background. But this is interesting because if in reality space travel and even just the idea of a space suit, which has been around for over a century now, is still just technologically unfeasible, yet almost the entire population believes that it's reality. Looking at the conspiratorial side of things, we can see that what's really going on here is when we start tying in the Masonic and occult aspect of the deception here, it does start to seem akin to a type of alchemical working, a magical working, a spell, if you will, and whereby something that, even though it's technologically impossible, the whole world believes it's possible and believes that it's real, and has, we've been ingesting this imagery, this idea, this iconography our entire lives, generations of people now. And it really does implant a bigger idea in our subconscious, if you will, which goes far beyond the physical, far beyond the quote-unquote science, far beyond just the surface level understanding of it all. There really is an esoteric meaning embedded in this, I believe. And essentially what it boils down to is the ascension of man, and the space-suited individual represents the ascended man, or the evolved man. And it's just so interesting to think about this kind of idea, and then to start looking at clips such as what I opened with here from the movie The Right Stuff. And they're pushing the limits and testing out the X1 and different rocket engines and speed, trying to break speed barriers and altitude records and all these things, and where he goes up through the sky and then finally pierces to the point where he can barely see the stars. And I look at a scene like that now, and it just seems so it just says a lot more than I would have ever gathered from it even a year ago. And it really is all about, it's this whole idea that we've been fed through sci-fi and through American patriotic propaganda our whole lives, about pushing the limits and going where no man has gone before and reaching for the stars and all these sorts of phrases that we don't even think about. And yet these are actually all very sort of Gnostic maxims. And once again, you can step back and look at this whole idea of going into outer space and conquering space as embodying the underlying spiritual message of ascension, of spiritual evolution. And even beyond that, you can even look at just scientism as a whole as really just another version, another modernized form of Gnosticism, right? Where instead of seeking the hidden secret knowledge from some higher level of a secret society or a mystery school, the universe itself is basically the mystery school, and the whole idea is unlocking the secrets of the universe, unlocking the knowledge that's in the cosmos itself. And this is what materialistic evolution, scientific materialism and evolution ultimately is trying to do. It's just looking at trying to understand the physical universe as holding the secrets that we have to somehow figure out. And then, of course, if you throw in the possibility of aliens or extraterrestrial life, it kind of really blends those two ideas together. Where if people do believe in aliens, then it's almost always assumed that there at least be some aliens that are of a higher intelligence. They're further along in the evolutionary process. And so they would function as the ascended masters, as the high priests, as the leaders of the initiates of these mysteries, these universal cosmological mysteries. And so it's just Gnosticism. And so coming back to the idea of the spacesuit, on the one hand, it's interesting when you see it in so many science fiction films, where it seems to quite plainly show just how fragile and how cumbersome and how limiting a physical spacesuit would be in terms of going into the universe, going into the exploring different planets and things. It's vulnerable to a leak. It's vulnerable to breaking down, and it's all that's protecting you from a harsh alien world or from the cold vacuum of space or whatever. And so, embedded in that, I believe it's sort of, in sort of this backhanded way, it actually kind of itself pushes the idea of the need to transcend the physical altogether. In order, and this is what is so interesting about so many space-themed sci-fi movies, is that they always seem to kind of come up against this idea of the physical limitations of exploring space. And so there's kind of this paradox that people who are fervent believers in space even admit to, in terms of whether it's just the distance between stars, millions of light years, it's just too far to travel in a single person's lifetime, even if you're going the speed of light. And even if you could get there, then are you going to terraform every planet in order to make it habitable for humans? These sorts of questions, and all of which I think ultimately serves to push people towards thinking about how to somehow transcend all those limitations, how to either transcend the physical limitations due to just vast distances through things like wormholes and interdimensional travel, or how to transcend spacesuits, the need for spacesuits and things like that, through basically some sort of transhumanist ideas, a la Ray Kurzweil and such. And so really it ends up kind of promoting this magical mindset, this sorcery mindset, which is the whole idea. And not to mention that this does start to make sense when we're trying to imagine the thinking and motivation behind people who are, say, Freemasons and knowingly participating in, fake moon landings or fake spacewalks and fake whatever. It is admittedly hard to understand, like, what is the psychology behind that? How do people justify doing that and lying about it and going to such an extent to try and stage all these things? But if they're looking at it as, like I said, this alchemical process, if they're looking at it in terms of this is what we have to do in order to get the underlings, to get the uninitiated, the profane, to absorb the basic spiritual concepts that only they believe they understand the higher reaches of. And then amazingly enough, it actually kind of starts to make a little more sense why they would willingly do that. Anyhow, that's my thoughts.